News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
And a very good evening to you and a warm welcome to Newsline Live. Now then, our guest this evening is an attorney at law and a prolific writer with a weekly column and so on. And he's, of course, as I said before, an attorney at law. He's right here with me, and let's ask him how important it is for Sri Lanka to correct its lapses in good governance and other things too. Mr. Javed Yusuf, very good evening and very warm welcome to Newsline.
Good evening, Faraz.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. How important is it for Sri Lanka to correct its, let's call them lapses, because otherwise we get into long argument, lapses in good governance? How important is Sri Lanka, and perhaps you can give us some examples of good governance lapses?
Yes, I think if you ask me at this point of time, it is critical. It's almost a matter of life and death. Because at all times, of course, we anticipate and we expect good governance. But at this time, because of what has happened in the past few years and the economic crisis that we are facing, lapses in good governance have to be corrected. And in terms of decision making, now how do you correct good governance? One is you have to have a good system, and that's what a lot of people talk about, system change.
Yeah.
And also choice of individuals who are capable to make correct decisions. I have ideological differences, different approaches to solve problems, but good governance requires accountability. And here when I talk about accountability, it's not legal accountability because the law will take its course, but political accountability for the decisions you make which affect people across the country. Then of course the much talked about corruption which has seeped into all aspects of our life.
Would you say that corruption is a pandemic?
Well, it's almost there. Of course, over the years.
Or is it an endemic?
Well, it's difficult to give a label in that way, but it's so widespread. I mean, not that there has not been corruption in the past, there has been. I remember in 1977, after the Mahaveli Accelerated Program, we got aid from several countries.
Indeed.
Ronnie DeMille, the finance minister, at one point said that of the aid that came for this project, 1/3 went into private pockets. That's from the finance minister who was the minister at that time. But now, as we see in the media, the stories, corruption in its most untrammeled form, plus also in addition to corruption, but actually it is a form of corruption, is the utter waste on projects which do not generate income, which cannot pave its way, just for what are vanity projects, have really been a big burden on the economy. So all these have to be corrected. It's a formidable task, but I'm confident it can be done provided there's a political will to do so.
But where is the political will? You know, we had, for example, we had 2014 in the campaign for the 2015 election, the run-up to that. 2014, you know, the then opposition highlighted and yelled themselves hoarse about corruption, state-sponsored corruption, nepotism and so on. And they promised accountability, but once they got the reins of power, they seem to have forgotten those campaign promises. And we had sideshows, you know, it was a circus. We had people going in and out of the newly formed FCID office. We had a committee based at the entrance to Temple Trees who sort of decided on the or the different cases that the FCID ought to be looking at. All these were systemic departures from due process. And at the end of the day, we had, I think, quite memorably, we had Sajjan Vaskunawarna, held inside in remand for about 6 months. And once he was released, the only real tangible thing that happened was that he was charged for failure to disclose his asset and liabilities declaration, and he was fined 1,000 rupees. Really? Did we spend so much of time and effort just to fine him 1,000 rupees? And at the same time, at that very moment, there were, at least if I'm not mistaken, stand to be corrected, over 60 other MPs who hadn't filed at the same, so they were in the same boat as he was. But here he was, I'm not holding a candle to him, but I'm just pointing it out. So where is the political will? Where will it come? When will it come? Today, more than anything else, in the state of our economy, an $80+ billion economy is now languishing in the around 70 billion or just under 70 billion. It's contracted. And if ever there was a time that the government should be showing an example, setting an example of cutting costs, cutting down on extravaganza, that time is now. But I noticed somebody pointed it out, that the health and education spend in this government, the health and education spend together is less than what is spent on defense. So defense is more. Health and education. You would think that in a country like ours, it would be the other way around. What do you have to say?
Yeah, of course, that's a big puzzle to me also, because at least during the time there was an armed conflict going on, there could be some justification for spending on the defense sector. But now, 2009 we finished. Now 13 years later, if the defense budget is more than education and health put together, then there's something very seriously wrong, because we have to cut all corners and do only the essentials. And defense in that form is, in my view, not an essential. We have a big crisis about dollars.
Indeed, it's one of the 5 crises, and I think it came along second. We had the economic crisis, we had the dollar crisis, we have a food crisis, we have a tax crisis, and we have the interest rate crisis. And there's another crisis which nobody's really paying much attention to, and that's the brain drain crisis. There's scores of youngsters leaving our country, and it's like Sri Lanka is some sort of training ground for Australasia and the Americas and wherever. People are going, and they're going in droves.
Yeah, no, that is another tragedy, because at one time we were complaining about brain drain, but now, while people are leaving the country in search of better prospects abroad, there is also encouragement for them to leave, because the hope is that they will send dollars. So now this is really going to drain our country, because we need young people and brains to pull us out of this mess.
But they also need to give those young people opportunity to shine, opportunity to let their dreams come true. How does one achieve that, Mr. Javed Yusuf?
Yeah, so that's quite correct, because people won't leave the country where they were born, where their family is, easily. But it's a failure of the state to provide them with the necessary opportunities to live a reasonably good life. And people who are going, now even the other day, apart from the brain drain, even people at different levels are desperately trying to get out of the country. There was a ship which was picked up with
Yeah.
300 people trying to risk their lives to go to Canada.
Yeah.
This type of story we are hearing. So really, in that sense, it brings home the urgency of the situation, and we need to arrest this. But again, the country is also a bit divided, you know.
But Mr. Yusuf, let me, I just want to point this out. Sri Lanka's economy, as I said before, and I've been saying this for quite a while now, has contracted. It's got smaller, our economy. And therefore, when we look at the environment, the impact on the environment from our emissions, our carbon dioxide levels is far less because we're not using the consumptions down. It's less than 1 ton per capita. The United States is 12. So what was the earthly reason for our delegation to COP27 to be led by the president of our country and all the attendant expenditure? How much did the president and his team spend on attending COP27? Did they travel economy or coach, or did they travel business or first class? Really? Was there a need to do that? Wouldn't it have been better to have sent our ambassador, the nearest ambassador wherever it was, to Egypt? You know, maybe we have an ambassador in Egypt. I don't know. I'm sure we do. If we don't, we have one in Riyadh.
No, we have in Egypt.
Yes, so then they could have sent him there and told him to represent our interests and so on. But why do you think that they don't seem, do they not care?
Yeah, well, with regard to COP, I don't know how many people went and what was the cost.
I mean, look, if the president went, his security went.
Yeah.
And at least one aide. That's in my book, as a citizen of this country, I think that that is not on. I don't want my president to go and spend our money. Sorry. It can be anyone. It can be Gotabe, Mahinda, or anyone. Who else was president? It can be anyone. I'm not talking about the individual, I'm talking about the presidency. So when they tell us that, you know, $9 a day, $270 a month, 100,000 rupees, the tax bracket. So everybody, even the Basunas are going to get, technically they should have to pay taxes. You try collecting it from them. And is $9 a day so much of money for them to be able to tax it? You know, so how, as a person who writes opinion pieces on a regular basis, what would you say to the public out there? How can the public make a difference?
Well, at this point of time, the public, in terms of expenditure and so on, they are taxed heavily. Really, they are at the very bottom of the bracket. But what the public can do is to impress upon the lawmakers, the legislators, and be vigilant with regard to what is happening and try to influence the government to take the correct steps. And I think that is a role now the public is also called upon to do, because in a democracy, as we understand in these times, no longer can you just vote at an election and wait, give a blank check to the government and wait. You have to be eternally watchful, vigilant, raise concerns and make the concerns known to the government, because invariably those who get into government tend to get isolated from the people, and that is where we come back to the other issue of a system, the difference between the executive presidency and a Westminster system.
Just before we go into the break, Mr. Javed Yusuf, as a citizen of Sri Lanka, as citizen, would you welcome elections?
Yes, when this crisis broke out, I myself was very skeptical that we could have elections, even in 6 months, because of the fact that you know, the money situation, the turmoil in the country and so on. But after what has happened in the past few months, I feel the only way we can resolve this in some form is to have elections.
On that note, let's go for a quick break and take a peek at this evening's headline news from the News First Primetime News team. We'll see you on the other side of the break with Mr. Javed Yusuf.
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
25% for 2 months, 25.5% for 4 months. Valuable FD.
Shakti TV proudly presents Eastern Beach Music Festival.
Bari bari puli anja dada, tunja dada, sola sola.
Catch Indian playback singers Satya Prakash and Hari Priya along with Agni.
Come on, baby, let's go on the planet.
The mega musical show held in Batticlow on the 12th and 13th of November at 7 p.m. exclusively on Shakti TV.
News First Headlines. Main sponsor.
Anka ege arakshita iti gini petti. Surya gini petti.
Activists want UN to intervene against repression. UN resident coordinator welcomes right to peaceful protest. Why did China support the Rajapaksas? UNP local government member goes to the Chinese embassy. Millions were spent on drafting a new constitution. Court orders to question Gotabaya Rajapaksa on the millions of rupees found in his bedroom. Travel ban on State Minister of Tourism.
News First Headlines. Main sponsor.
Anka ege arakshita iti gini petti. Surya gini petti.
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
And welcome back to Newsline Live. I'm in conversation with Mr. Javed Yusuf, attorney at law and a regular columnist in the press. And you can send your questions in. Thank you very much. 0772 300 305. Mr. Javed Yusuf, you've served on different sort of these commissions and so on. What's your experience? Is it just a whole lot of talk, or is the receiving government of the day really interested in what these commissions are trying to do? Do they have the freedom?
Yeah, when you say commissions, of course, I've served on the Uddalagama Commission. That was a fact-finding commission.
Yeah.
But a lot of those commissions' reports have not been implemented. Not only that, there are several commissions and so on. Even in the LLRC commission, they have not been implemented. So in that sense, it's a bit of a wastage of funds. But some commissions, I think particularly the commissions during Mrs. President Chandrika's time, there were commissions with regard to disappearances and all. Some of those recommendations did get implemented, but not in the full form.
So when you say that, I also noticed that you one-time ambassador to Saudi Arabia. Would you agree with me that our foreign service is almost nothing short of a modern-day disgrace in this way? Because I believe that they're not really proactive enough. For example, they're traveling all around the world, not the Foreign Office itself, but everyone's trying to get dollars in. But they fail to appreciate the fact that the Arab world, from the deserts of Saudi Arabia to the Gulf Coast and so on, if you examine their assistance and the opportunities they have created for Sri Lanka, they do regularly more than many others. The opportunities they created in terms of employment. It's still going on. At one point, $7 billion. That's enough to pay our $500 million a month every year for our recurring, and our fuel bill and so on. But yet, where are the regular trips or the regular, shall we say, the interaction between these nations? Sri Lanka is sadly lacking. And do they seriously expect them to help us in the way that they used to? We were held in great esteem in those days. What went wrong? Why is it like that now?
Yes, I think what happened is that we did not realize the value that the Middle East or the Gulf countries brought to Sri Lanka. On one aspect, source of foreign exchange, as you mentioned, $7 billion annually. At one time,
and it's every year.
Yeah,
it's every year.
At one time, during the armed conflict, I remember the figure, it was 6.5 billion, which was equivalent to the money we were spending on the war. So really they were funding the war, if you like to call it. So that is with regard to our employees, and I feel that the state has not done enough to look after the interests of the employees. With regard to the foreign service itself, actually the foreign service, we have very good officials, we have had good officials, they are trained and they can do a lot. But it all depends on the political guidance and the direction that is given.
You're being very diplomatic, because obviously what you're saying is, and we all acknowledge it, the professionals, the career diplomats and so on, the career officials at the Foreign Office are pretty good. There's no two words about it. But the regular and growing politicization of the Foreign Service has not stood Sri Lanka in good stead. Has it?
No, it has not, because unfortunately, I hate to say this, but some of the appointments have left much to be desired. Some of them have done things which have brought disrepute to the country. I don't want to names, but overall, as you said, the foreign service is very dedicated and competent, but they must be given the correct direction. Now, I had the experience of working under the late Lakshman Kadirgama. He was a visionary minister, and he was a thinking person. I remember he realized the value of interacting with the Arab world, because he himself, when he was chairperson of the Bandaranaike Center for International Studies, he set up a unit to engage with the Arab world, to also to create Islamic studies. A curriculum was devised. Then when he became minister, he wanted to engage in diplomatic, economic diplomacy, and he entrusted a particular role for me in that, and I did one trip to try to bring investment in, and there was very positive response on that. But very unfortunately, before things went much further, he was assassinated. So that was a tragedy. But the point is, the potential is there, and the Arab world, as you rightly mentioned, has produced a lot of benefits. Apart from, of course, the dollars earned by our own expatriates, they are given aid. Now, for instance, I think they built a very good neurosurgical unit in the General Hospital.
Indeed.
In the Colombo drainage project, they have invested. In the Mahaveli, they have invested. But the Arab
and the Kenya
road,
bridge,
bridge
in Kenya.
Yeah, but they are generally not very good at marketing their own work, so people don't realize.
Because that's probably because that's their culture. They don't really talk about it.
That's right. That's right.
So they do that, and I don't think that their culture really permits them to talk about it.
Yeah.
And while we're on the subject, ladies and gentlemen, let's remind everyone who's worth reminding, but this is worth reminding, is of course Mr. Yusuf, the Saudi Arabian government's gift to Sri Lanka post the tsunami. I think it's $15 million village with houses and a complete village, really, with everything in it, community hall, the whole works. Not even a dog is allowed to live in there. It's gone through, nobody's ever occupied it.
That's a big tragedy, really.
I mean, it's like a slap in the face. And Saudi Arabia has over 500,000 Sri Lankans working there. What will happen if they told them all to leave the country? Go away. We won't renew your visa. Because it's a slap in the face.
Yes. That is the point. We don't realize when we get a benefit, we don't know how to utilize it. And also, Faraz, you will recall, there was a parliamentarian, a member of the clergy, who once said, we don't need Arab oil, we can manage.
Really? Yeah. I wonder where that person is now. The public would love to hear from him, I'm sure.
Yeah, he's around. He's still in Parliament.
Well, we've got 3 more minutes before we finish and hand it over to the Primetime News, Mr. Yusuf. Many questions about what, in your view, as a citizen of Sri Lanka, what should this government do for a quick fix to get the economy going again? Prices are gone up. What, in your view, what should the government do?
Well, I'm not an economist and I can't suggest a quick fix, but what I think I can suggest or think aloud as to what should be done, of course, while trying to generate dollars and so on, we have to cut expenditure to the bare minimum. And also there is a great deal of necessity to provide cushion to the poor and vulnerable. You know, the IMF has always been looked upon as unfriendly to the poor and so on. That's why there are some people who are ideologically opposed to going to the IMF. But in this situation, I think there is no alternative to go to the IMF. And from what I can see, the IMF also seems to have changed some of its focus, because they, in their communications, refer to the need to provide support for the the poorer sections.
So we need to have some help for the vulnerable.
Vulnerable, definitely.
And of course, Sri Lanka's charitable charitableness, if you like, between all Sri Lankans is going to be severely affected now, and it is those vulnerable who are going to be affected because they have widened the tax net and prices have gone up. But here's a message, or here's a statement. It's not a question, but a statement from one of our viewers, and I shall read it out in full. Dear Mr. Yusuf, why should the citizens of the country be victimized by these corrupt leaders? Why aren't those who brought this country to this low ebb, why aren't they being questioned? The former president, having admitted to so many mistakes, continues to live a comfortable life as he is entitled to because he was a former president. That, to me, is reflective of the people's mindset. Would you half agree? Would you totally agree?
No, I fully agree. Of course, I'm a little hesitant to speak about he's being given those facilities, because that is provided in the law.
Yes, that's what I said.
But there has to be, as I said earlier, political accountability for all the wrongs. And that is not happening. Now, for instance...
unfortunately, Mr. Yusuf, we've come to the end of our program. But thank you very much for being on it. It's now time for the Primetime News from the Newsfirst Primetime News team. Take care, have a great evening, have a great weekend, and God bless you all.